Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Nyirenda. I'm speaking today on behalf of the organizers of the first Forest Governance Forum for the Asia Pacific region. I work at the Center for International Development and Training, which is at the University of Wolverhampton. I'm representing BirdLife International as well, who are leaders on the project that is delivering this first Forest Governance Forum for the Asia Pacific region. I'm also representing our partners in the 4 project countries of Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So I welcome all of you to this first Forest Governance Forum, and we're very excited to have you on this event, and we hope you have a fruitful next 4 days discussing issues that are relevant for the work that you do or for the lives that you lead around forest governance, forest conservation, biodiversity, and importantly, climate change. Before we start with the official formalities, we have a video that we would like to share with you. The video will cover some aspects of the project so that you can be aware of what our project is all about. So let's watch the video for the next 5 minutes.
The tropical forests of Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and the Philippines cover over 154 million hectares. These landscapes are havens to an astounding variety of plants and animals found nowhere else, with new species still being discovered. But these forests and habitats and ecosystem services they provide are threatened. Felling for agriculture, such as oil palm plantations, illegal and unsustainable logging, and forest degradation are severe problems in the region. We urgently need to retain and restore these forests to recover nature in the coming decade and support equitable, carbon neutral, nature positive future. Local communities and indigenous people want to protect their local forests, but efforts are stacked against the odds due to lack of technical knowledge, experience, and political influence. That's why the Forest Governance Project is equipping local communities with the skills and resources to protect and manage their forest homes.
Thanks to the European Union for funding this project. This project brought non-state actors from Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Papua New Guinea for better forest monitoring, understanding the health of the forest, and carbon stock assessment. Forest governance is everybody's business, so it really empowers local communities and other stakeholders.
The Forest Governance Project is providing training so that local communities can monitor forest cover, condition, and carbon stocks.
This project enables us to bring non-state actors together, from those working in the timber industry, local government, and conservation sector, to build new skills and knowledge of what effective forest governance looks like. For example, tree plantation nurseries offer a place where timber farmer group can come to learn about sustainable forest management principles, both technical and practical, and then adopt these practices in their own work.
We are working to ensure that local communities and indigenous people are well informed on forest conservation and management through access to forest-related data and policies. The people that live and work in the forest know them the best. The indigenous communities in Papua New Guinea work with the Tenkili Conservation Alliance to monitor the forests and provide updates and improvements to data sets that are used as advocacy tools for increasing forest protection. By strengthening existing networks and creating new ones, we are encouraging cross-border collaboration and information exchanges to improve the scientific, political, and economic case for forest policy priorities. The Haribon Foundation have set up a network of conservationists that provide collective action on forest policy, communication, and conservation advocacy issues. This approach has led to successes in shaping legislation to better account for forest biodiversity. We are providing the advocacy tools and tactics for indigenous peoples, local communities, and NGOs to challenge damaging forest laws and policies. The Malaysian Nature Society has been working on RED Plus preparation, development, and implementation, raising awareness of main forest policy processes, and listening to views and concerns of local people on how their work and livelihoods could be affected.
BirdLife International's local to global approach for nature conservation is critical through better forest governance. Healthy forests is a sign of healthy life. This work on the ground is critical to address unprecedented global challenges. This critical year for global decision-making on nature, climate, and human rights. Right now, governments around the world are negotiating a new global biodiversity framework and the climate action needed to address the environmental planetary emergency. And we know that more equitable, effective forest governance is key to the successful delivery of both. Together, we're working towards a better world, an equitable, carbon-neutral, nature-positive future.
Thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, forest governance is everybody's business. And we hope that by the end of this week, we'll realize how everyone else, other stakeholders can also be involved in improving forest governance. Just before we go into the main opening session, I just want to highlight a few things about the forest governance forums themselves. As you might already know, this is a platform for exchanging ideas, experiences, and knowledge on forest governance in the Asia-Pacific region, but also drawing on the experience of others in other parts of the world. We hope and expect that over the next 4 days, we'll have stimulating exchanges, discussions, and ideas on forest governance issues in our region, in our work, and also look at the future in terms of action on climate change and nature and development. We also hear from a range of international experts on forest governance, conservation, as well as the communities or the people that live around and within the forest that we are seeking to improve their management of. We hope to also have some debate on all these issues and discussions around management, restoration, reduction of deforestation, and also combating forest degradation and halting illegal logging. As I've said before, this is the first of the Asia-Pacific Forest Governance Forum, or the first Forest Governance Forum to be held in the Asia-Pacific region. And we are very excited about that. It's an idea that we started putting together about 2 years ago, but unfortunately, because of COVID, it has not been possible to have this event face-to-face. Our initial idea was to have this event in Jakarta, but fortunately, we're still able to have this event online on Zoom, and we hope we'll all benefit from this event. As mentioned, this event is being delivered as part of a wider project and sort of a set of actions. It's part of a project funded by the European Union. The project's name is Strengthening Non-State Actor Involvement in Forest Governance in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Papua New Guinea. As I mentioned earlier on, the project involves a number of partners in these countries, namely Burung Indonesia, Haribon Foundation in the Philippines, the Tenkile Conservation Alliance in Papua New Guinea, and also the University of Papua New Guinea in New Guinea. Ourselves, the CIDT, we are also involved in this project, and our main role is to coordinate the Forest Governance Forum. And overall, the project is led by BirdLife International. This event is part of a series of events that CIDT has been involved in over the past 10 years or so, mainly in Central and West Africa, where these Forest Governance Forum have become an integral part of the forest policy and climate change policy processes there. And we hope that this first one will also form that integral part of forest policy processes in the Asia Pacific region. So the project is seeking to empower and enhance the involvement of non-state actors, civil society, communities, and others as well in monitoring nature conservation and policy processes at important forest landscapes in the region. There are four main outcomes or changes that the project is aiming to achieve. The first one is around the increasing the capability of these local actors, mostly provincial and national non-state actors, to monitor and track the changes that are happening within the forest in terms of the condition, but also in terms of carbon stocks. The second one, which is also very important, is around increasing transparency and access to information and accountability. So the data and information that is being generated from these monitoring operations will then be utilized to increase transparency. We're also seeking to create viable, constructive, and sustainable networks of well-informed non-state actors, including collaborations with others in other countries within the region as well. Importantly, we're also seeking to have informed and effective participation of non-state actors in national and as well as provincial forest policy processes, including the main ones, FLAG VPA, ED+, and other related policies. So really, the whole aim is to create this equitable and effective forest governance by encouraging local communities to be involved in decision-making processes, increasing knowledge and training capability on forest monitoring, creating and enabling well-informed networks and coalitions of non-state actors so that they can speak with a strong voice and have impact, and also encouraging their involvement and participation in these key forest policy processes. And then in terms of the overview of the next few days, we'll start today with a 3-hour session. The first part of that session will comprise opening remarks from a representative of the European Union. We're also looking to have a representative from the Indonesian government to be involved in this opening remarks session, but unfortunately they've pulled out at the last minute. After that, we'll go straight into the main technical session, which is going to look at global and regional to local approaches and challenges in improving forest governance, biodiversity, and climate change. This session will be over 2 hours, and within that time, we'll also have a question and answer session, and we encourage your participation and utilizing the chat function on Zoom to share your questions. And then the rest of the week is as outlined in the slide. We will also have simultaneous interpretation in both French and in Indonesian to enable wider engagement with stakeholders and participants in the Asia Pacific region, but also a wider international audience. So those are the sort of quick remarks or points I wanted to make before we start the main session. And now I have the opportunity to introduce the chair or facilitator for the main session. I think it's an honor for me because this is someone that I've worked with for more than 10 years now as the head of the Center for International Development and Training here at the University of Wolverhampton. I would like to introduce Professor Philippe Dearden to facilitate the next session. Phil, as we all call him within CIDT, did his environmental science degree from the University of East Anglia, and he started his career many years ago as a land use officer in Malawi, and then spent a number of years in Papua New Guinea, a country that he's still quite keenly interested in and follows what is happening there on a regular basis. He was involved in forestry and natural resources governance issues right at the start when these issues were starting to become more and more prominent. Over the last 30 years or so, Phil has built a reputable international development experience and has worked in more than 60 countries as a facilitator, consultant, trainer, and researcher. He has experience in a number of different sectors, including agriculture, forestry, environmental science, enterprise, governance, education, and health. And over the years, he has undertaken over 150 international capacity development consultancies across many countries in the world. So without wasting much time, I would like to hand you over to Professor Philippe Dearden. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks for that introduction. It's not often I get introduced quite like that, but thank you. And just a big thanks to Richard for all the work that he has put in to get this to actually happen. It's a real pleasure for me to be here this morning with such a distinguished sort of list of guests ahead of this next week. I'm really excited about this next week, and I hope that you will be tuning in for as much as you possibly can. It's also nice to see some old friends, I say old friends, new friends, as well as not old physically, but friends of a long time ago. And to be here literally connecting with everybody. It's a real shame we can't be in Indonesia. COVID has put that, unfortunately, to a stop, but it's great to be here like this, and it's great to be sharing. We're going to start, first of all, with a word of welcome from Daniel Hatches, who I think is in Thailand. I think I'm right in saying that. Daniel, let me hand over to you as the EU rep. And let me start by saying a huge thanks for the funding for this program. It's very, very foresighted, in my opinion, that you're funding this program. Let me hand over to you, Daniel.
Phil, distinguished speakers, Mrs. Surita, Dr. Nazi, Ms. Tolikorpus, and Mr. Hopkins, and all of those who are joining us virtually from the Asia-Pacific region and internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to speak at the opening session of the first Asia-Pacific Forest Governance Forum. My name is Daniel Hatches. I'm Minister Counselor, Head of Cooperation for Malaysia at the European Union delegation. First of all, let me congratulate the BirdLife International and the partners, Burung Indonesia, Malaysian Nature Society, Aribon Foundation, Philippines, Tengkile Conservation Alliance, the University of Papua New Guinea, and the Center for International Development Training at the University of Wolverhampton for organizing this important event. And let me praise your commitments and hard work in implementing this strengthening non-state actor involvement in forest governance in Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Papua New Guinea, this project since 2017. So important, the role of the non-state actors and their involvement in this matter and in so many other matters. Forest environments in the Asia-Pacific region are globally significant hotspots, as it was said in this magnificent clip, hotspots of animal, bird, and plant life, vast stores of carbon and homes to distinct indigenous communities. They are environments that host critical social and ecosystem services, as we were just reminded. Tropical forests of Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and the Philippines, as we were told, cover 154 million hectares, so 1.5 million square kilometers, much of which are recognized as key biodiversity areas. However, these forests and the forests around the globe are in trouble. Human populations are growing rapidly, farmland is expanding and clearing vast swaths of forest. And as we saw in the video clip, illegal logging, unregulated logging is a huge threat as well. According to Global Forest Watch in 2020, so in 365 days, very recently, it's a size equivalent to the ones of the Netherlands of primary forest that was deforested, 42,000 square kilometers. These challenges mean it has never been more essential that nations reduce illegal logging, strengthen sustainable and legal forest management, improve governance, and better account for the value of the forest. This is why there is a need for a better forest governance and sustainable forest management approaches. And this is why we are here today and for the next 4 days. So during these 4 days of the forum, you will discuss in depth on the lessons learned and the best practices on key areas of forest governance in this region, including the EU Forest Law Enforcement Governance and Trade, in abbreviation FLEGT. Allow me to share a few additional actions from the European Union on this front, and I won't be too long, but hear it. Between 2014 and 2020, so it's 7 years, the European Union invested more than 650 million euros to support the partner countries globally to preserve their forests and to contribute to sustainable, inclusive economies and societies. To name some, very few, of our flagship initiatives, Euroclimate Plus is a program with a focus of environmental sustainability. It aims at reducing the impact of climate change and its effect in 18 Latin American countries by fostering climate mitigation, adaptation, resilience, and investment, and in supporting the implementation of the country's nationally determined contribution, what we call the NDCs. You know better than I what I'm talking about. Another one, ECOFAC 6, aims at preserving biodiversity and fragile ecosystems in Central Africa, with nearly 17 protected areas spread over 7 different states and 8 priority landscapes for conservation. It is promoting a green economy characterized by endogenous, sustainable and inclusive economic development, as well as the fight against climate change. The EU also supports the UN collaborative program on reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, the REDD+, in developing countries, as you know, to promote the informed and meaningful involvement of all stakeholders, including indigenous peoples and other forest-dependent communities. Additionally, the European Union hosts several facilities that support policies and works with partner countries such as the EU FLEGT facility to support the implementation of the EU FLEGT action plan with a focus on the voluntary partnership agreements taken by the various countries we support. And this EU FLEGT facility works in Central Latin America, in Africa and in Asia. Then we also have the EU Forest for the Future facility, F4, to focus on forest partnerships to contribute to healthy forest ecosystems, once again, all over the world. Then the first Asia-Pacific Forest Governance Forum today, the first, as we said, is an excellent example of the importance of working together. It brings together you, key stakeholders from governments. Well, okay, we had a cancellation this afternoon. We regret it, but we understand. Key stakeholders from government, I said, civil society, private sector, communities, scientists, researchers, and students interested in or working in the field of forest governance, FLEGT, voluntary partnership agreements, REDD+, and related international and national initiatives to discuss effective forest governance approaches. So I trust that the forum will also discuss an important aspect of forest governance, which relies upon forest monitoring to be effective and help realize environmental impact goals. Monitoring should focus on the 3 C's of the forest governance: forest coverage, forest condition, and carbon stock assessment. What we saw on the sheets in these magnificent video spots we had at the start. At the heart of achieving and delivering global goals for nature, climate, and people, the European Union ensures to continue building sustainable partnership with all parties for engagement and dialogue at all levels with stakeholders and the empowerment of local non-state actors to have their voices heard and be included in the decision-making processes. Protecting and conserving forest landscapes in the Asia-Pacific region is a task that requires collaboration and commitment. These environments have an incredibly important role to play to help us achieve the goal of more equitable, carbon neutral, nature positive future. With that being said, I've spoken much too long. I wish you a successful conference and exchanges, and I'm proud that the European Union has been able to support this project through BirdLife International and the 6 partners in this long journey. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at the opening session.
Daniel, a huge thanks for being with us and outlining the EU support, which has been absolutely superb for many, many years now. It's been really, really nice to hear an overview of the work which the EU is funding there, not just in this area of the world, but in Africa and Latin America as well. And I think that really pulls together the bigger picture for us, which I think is really important. And it's that bigger picture that we want to start with looking at this morning. So thank you very much. And thank you for all your support, ongoing support, because it is so important to us all. Unfortunately, we haven't got anyone from the government of Indonesia, but I do have the speech from the government of Indonesia in front of me. I'm not going to read it, but I do want just to highlight one bit, and that was the fact that we were hoping to have this forum in Indonesia. Unfortunately, we can't have it in Indonesia, so we're having it virtually like this. But Agus did want to say that he was really looking forward to welcoming us to Indonesia, and he's very sorry that that can't actually happen in person. But he's delighted to know that over 400 people are going to be tuning into this over the next 4 days. And that is really quite an achievement. And again, I just want to thank the organizers, especially Richard, Habiba, Danny, Russell, and other colleagues in CIDT for all the work that they put in actually getting this to happen, because it is no mean achievement getting this sort of thing to happen. What I want to do now is to introduce the members of our panel. In fact, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in just a minute. We have a very distinguished panel this morning. Oh, we have a picture of them here. We have Patricia Zurita from BirdLife International. We have Robert Nasi from CIFOR. He's not actually in Indonesia. I understand he's in Newcastle at the moment, but so good morning to you, Robert. Victoria, I think we have she is the former UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples from the Philippines. And then again in the UK, we have David Hopkins from the UK Timber Trade Federation. And we're going to start this morning with some, if you like, some big picture questions. I'm going to be posing some questions to them, but I'm going to ask them to take literally a minute or so just to quickly say who they are and almost what is their interest in being here this morning. Let me start with Patricia.
Morning, Philippe, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all and to share this panel with Robert and Vicky and David. Thanks so much to Daniel and the huge support of the European Union enabling us to have this project going. For those of you who are not aware, BirdLife is this extraordinary family of over 115 partners around the world. We are the only network of conservation environmental organizations that come together from the ground up. I would like to thank you and welcome you all for joining this 4-day forum that brings together state and non-state actors, policymakers, practitioners, the scientific community, the private sector, and representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities to discuss and exchange different perspectives, experiences, and expertise on forest governance and the conservation of forests within the Asia-Pacific region. You heard it from Daniel. This is an incredibly important region for the world, and we're delighted to be able to be leading this project with the support of the European Commission. Enhancing the role of non-state actors of different kinds in nature conservation, from local and subnational to national to regional and global, is an absolutely key focus of BirdLife and the BirdLife family. Under this project, we are working with 3 of our BirdLife partners, Burung Indonesia, Haribon in the Philippines, and Malaysia Nature Society in Malaysia, as well as with Tenkile Conservation Alliance and the University of Papua New Guinea in Papua New Guinea, and of course with you guys at CIDT in the UK. The project is a fabulous example of our local to global partnership approach to conservation advocacy and actions. Is helping us show how we can ensure the sustainable and strong networks of well-informed civil society to work together towards addressing the global challenges with regards to climate change, nature, and people. We conserve birds, but we use them as extraordinary ambassadors for the rest of nature. And we protect their habitats and the global biodiversity by working directly with people and ensuring the sustainable use of the resources. We use birds as the entry point for wider conservation to show us the way, really. And our international renowned science has helped us to develop a global standard for identifying priority areas for the global persistence of biodiversity. These are the key biodiversity areas that stem from the important birds and biodiversity areas that helped us create the Natura 2000 40 years ago, and has helped us guide the creation of protected areas and the conservation of local areas with local communities and indigenous peoples all over the world for the last 40 years. Now, in addition to looking into what are the most important places, we use our information on birds to identify how are we doing in terms of achieving their conservation and also the commitments, such as the biodiversity, the Birds and Biodiversity Targets report that we just put out last year that shows how we have failed, unfortunately, but sometimes also succeeded on the current Aichi targets that hopefully will be revised with the new global biodiversity framework at the Biodiversity Convention Conference of the Parties that will take place next month in October in China. Now, the report that we put out shows us, for example, that 1/5 of the key biodiversity area network that is triggered by birds falls within lands managed by indigenous peoples, of which they have tenure to and rights. So both the conservation and people, so both biodiversity and the people who live there will benefit if we recognize the rights and traditional role in the management of these lands that indigenous peoples and local communities have. I'm sure that Vicky is going to be talking a lot more about this. We are part of many coalitions, one of which is advancing the global goal for nature of being nature positive, halting and reversing the loss of biodiversity by 2030. And this will only work if we ensure synergies between action and nature on climate change. These are two sides of the same coin, and these are two pieces of the same crisis, and we have to work on them together. And forests magically bring us to resolve both the nature and climate issues. And that can only happen if we make sure that people are part of the solution. I feel that this forum provides this extraordinary opportunity to exchange these invaluable insights on how inclusive and effective forest governance can help make nature positive a reality on the ground, not only in Asia Pacific, but around the world, and by working towards a wider, equitable, carbon neutral, nature positive future. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Patricia, and thanks for the really nice introduction to bird life. A little over 2 minutes, but that doesn't matter. It's great to have you with us, and thank you for that. Robert, you're sitting, I think, in Newcastle, but normally you're in Bogor in Indonesia. Great to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about C4 and a little bit about yourself.
Thanks. I'm going to cut short the sales speech about C4, about myself, because I believe that we are here to discuss about governance. So the Center for International Forestry Research is an international organization that has been working for now over 27 years on the very true issue of forest governance, and we are headquartered in Indonesia, and I'm the Director General of C4. End of the story for C4. Now, if we talk about the issue of governance, and I'm sorry, I give you my view now because I have a hard stop at 9 o'clock. I have to run to a PCR test. Everybody will tell you governance is an issue because of, we have this whole story of collusion, corruption, nepotism, illegal logging. But in fact, what we miss very often to recognize is is the whole framework that is set in many countries of the Asia-Pacific region and elsewhere, and that are in fact the underlying causes of all the problem we see in terms of deforestation and degradation. Did you have forest laws that are too complicated to really be implemented effectively? Do you have forest law that are top-down, so where very little involvement of the community when they were developed, and as a result, I mean, the community do not feel part of it, and I'm sure that Vicky will tell us that even better. And then you have the whole fragmentation of the governance, so that you want to make a problem intractable, you create a couple of ministries, and one is taking care of agriculture, the other one is taking care of trade, the third one of environment, and the fourth one on forest, and you can be sure that it's not going to work. And ultimately, the most powerful actors that are very often corporation or somebody within the government are likely to do what they want to do. So I think it's very important to not get lost into this seeing only the symptom of the problem and not tackling the causes, which are the underlying causes of deforestation and forest degradation. Back to you, Philippe.
Thank you, Robert. Good to start us off. I mean, thinking around these bigger issues. So thank you very much for that. I want now to turn to Victoria Torres-Corpez, the former UN Special Rapporteur for Rights of Indigenous People in the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Philippe, and thank you very much to BirdLife and CIDT for organizing this event. Well, I used to be the Special Rapporteur. I was the Rapporteur from 2014 to 2020. But all the time, I've been the Executive Director of Tibtiba Foundation, which is an Indigenous Peoples global organization dealing with advocacy and protection of Indigenous peoples' rights. In both my roles as part of the global and the national and regional Indigenous movements, as well as the Rapporteur, I have seen a lot of situations in which forests are, as far as inclusive and effective forest governance is concerned. I think that, you know, we cannot really talk of effective and inclusive forest governance if we don't talk about Indigenous people's rights to protect and manage and control their forests and other ecosystems. And now we are seeing more and more that whenever there's a country where there are no laws that protect the rights of Indigenous peoples, usually the rate of deforestation is also much higher. And I think that tells us a lot in terms of the need to really understand better what are the customary laws and governance systems of Indigenous peoples as it relates to forests and other natural resources, and how are these being protected and or recognized by governments. And I've looked at, I must confess, I haven't really been very, closely working with the FLEGT-VPA process, but I did participate in some of the discussions of the global level. And I'd like to say that, you know, the way that the FLEGT and VPA partnership is being negotiated and the principles put in place are quite, you know, are good, because it does connect the supply and demand issues, you know, related to use of forest trees, forest timber, as well as timber products. And maybe this is a good example of what needs to be done for us to see that kind of link and to investigate and interrogate further where are the problems and what are the opportunities that we can see in making people aware of where the products that they are consuming come from, and what are the situations of the people who are directly related to the production and processing of these products. So in that sense, I think that the EU FLEGT program is a potential, can potentially contribute to the rights of Indigenous peoples being protected. And I know that in the principles, this is there. But again, the big problem is the issue of legality. I have looked a lot at the question of legality, and one of the problems identified is that legality is defined according to national processes. And we know that in Asia, many countries do not have laws or legal policies that recognize the rights of indigenous peoples. And this is really a big issue, although it can be, the potential is there, but if there is no process that really leads towards the formulation of laws and the effective implementation of these, then the dangers of indigenous peoples being displaced from their forest, being criminalized because they are protecting their forest or doing their traditional livelihood related to forest, then these risks are enhanced. And that is what I have seen in my role as the special rapporteur. I have mentioned this in the previous IUCN World Conservation Conference, where I cited cases of indigenous peoples being displaced, like for instance in Thailand, where the Kangkrachen Park was inscribed as a World Heritage Site, and yet the Karens who have been displaced have not yet been brought back, and the issues that they have brought forth to my attention have not been addressed. So I hope that this meeting that we're having now, this for the 3 days, will really raise those issues and come up with very good recommendations on how to deal with this. The fact that many indigenous peoples are not recognized in their countries. Secondly, that their customary or their traditional livelihoods related to forests in some countries are illegalized. And thirdly, of course, with the supply chain, the broader supply chain of both forest and agricultural products also directly impact on the situation of forests. And finally, the point raised earlier by Robert, where the incoherence and the fragmentation of laws and policies that have direct relevance to forest governance still remain in most countries that I know of, including my country, the Philippines. So we should tackle those issues and come up with some points that maybe can be fed into the countries which we are talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Really interesting points. And let me just reassure you, the roles of indigenous people are going to be very much a focus this week, very, very important. And thank you for bringing that in so early in our discussions, because it is absolutely critical. As we saw, I think, in the video, our starting video. Our fourth panelist is David Hopkins. David, well known to many of us. David is the Managing Director of the UK Timber Trade Federation. And we're going to be hearing from David a little bit longer at 9 o'clock this morning. But welcome to David. If you'd like just to say a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the Timber Trade Federation. Welcome, David.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for inviting me to take part today. I think I'm looking at the panel and looking at a lot of the other people involved today. I did initially feel a bit of a square peg in a round hole, because obviously I'm a representative of the private sector in these debates. And I think it's a very important voice to be heard within all of that, an important player to bring on board whenever we discuss issues of governance, because it is a lot of the time the actions of the private sector which need governing, or certainly need to see a governance framework within which they can operate. I'm very lucky in a way that although I represent the UK Timber Trade Federation, the UK is one of the major importers of timber. I think we're either the second or third largest timber importer in the world. As such, we have a very important responsibility, in my view, to the places that we source those goods from. We have a very enlightened board of directors in the organization who think that us playing a large role in international discussion is very important, and very important for the future of the industry. So I'm very lucky in that regard. Just on the subject of governance, and Robert had brought up some very good points here. I think that discussions like this are going to be vital now. They should have been vital years ago, and they're going to be vital in the future. I think there's going to be increasing and sometimes conflicting views when it comes to land use and management. Climate change is putting so much pressure on the need for us to find more renewable sources of material and renewable resources generally. We talk about renewable energy, but a lot of the stuff we use for our material life is easily depleted. We need more of those renewable resources, and natural resources can, particularly from biological resources, can show the way towards that. But also, the private sector then can be seen as an enemy for using those resources. We can start to see that people are going to want to be conserving them as well as using them. We can see, as the speaker just now mentioned, that Indigenous people can, their rights to carry on with a way of life can be seen as threatening to those resources. And I think where we come from in this debate today is the fact that without a proper legal governance framework, all you will have over forests and other natural areas, other natural resources and natural supply chains, is a series of small, intermittent and sort of internecine fighting amongst lots of different actors. It's absolutely imperative that we have a multi-stakeholder approach, and that includes absolutely everybody, government and non-state actors, including the private sector, so that you have a clear set of rules within which to operate. Without that, I think we will always have a series of sort of fighting, blaming, and getting nowhere, and ultimately sort of ruining the forests that we rely on. So really, my message today is going to be talking about how do we move towards that? How do we work together to achieve that? How do we make sure that all of those non-state and state actors are included in order to create a level playing field, not just for the private sector and the companies within the private sector, but for all of the stakeholders in society, to make sure that, that those resources are well managed, well stocked, and well maintained for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and very interesting. Looking forward to hearing more from you a little bit later. I quickly now want to have a little bit of discussion. We don't have a lot of time, but a little bit of discussion on some of the bigger questions. And my questions to the first question to the panel is what do we actually need to do at country, regional, and maybe international level if we're really going to achieve inclusive and effective forest governance in achieving equitable, carbon neutral, and a nature positive future? Let me ask Robert, because I know Robert has got to disappear. Let me ask Robert that big question. What have we got to do? I mean,
well, if we had the answer to this question, we probably not have this panel at this stage. So I'm not sure I can really give you the full answer, but clearly what we need to have is a better involvement of the main parties in designing governance instrument, and the main parties I think are not necessarily the government. They are the user. It could be the industry, but it could be also the buyer groups, and in the other sense the stewards of the land. I mean the communities and unless we design something that works for these people, we are going with all the best intention that possible, and not trying to have things that are not implementable. And as a result, you create things that offer loophole and ways to plunder the resource and to move into illegalities or many reasons. So we really need to have some legislation or governance that are more simpler and developed by and with the main player, the group. Otherwise, it is not going to work really, or we are going to be in the same situation 20 years from now. And that was one of the problem of the FLEG VPA. That was a very good instrument, but seemed very, very complicated and very long. And we have only today one country that has a license, and is in Indonesia. And then now, because of a change of policy, it seems that we are moving out of the VPA into something that we call forest partnership. So then we may have incomprehension by the players. So it's very important to be consistent, sit the right people at the table. It's not always easy to see who are the right people, and develop things that are implementable. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and thanks for raising the FLEG issue, because it is a big issue at the moment, as everyone will be aware. But thanks for raising that. Indonesia being the first country in the Asia region to actually get the flag recognition. Is it going to stay? Big debate going on at the moment. Patricia and Victoria, any comments from you on what we need to do? Is it a bottom-up approach? Is it a top-down approach? How do we approach these really big issues? Let me ask Patricia first.
Thank you. Well, I mean, you heard it from Vicky and from others. Empowering local communities and indigenous peoples is absolutely crucial. But let's talk a little bit about what good governance is. I mean, you have a combination of policy structures, processes, and options at multiple scales. They have to be global, national, subnational, and local, and they have to be incredibly clear and transparent. And you heard it from David. That not only helps us understand how the rules work, but actually makes it incredibly transparent for all actors on how to make it happen, how to make it work, right? And it's not about only the structures and how they're nested into each other, but also how do we involve multiple actors and how we are truly representative. And it is not only about the state actors that will be, leading the policy and the governing frameworks, but especially the opportunity of enabling civil society, private sector, indigenous peoples, local communities, women, girls, youth, everybody to be part of the process and also be knowledgeable of the process. I think one of the huge advantages that this project has had is the opportunity of working on these 4 key areas of building up the capacity of non-state actors in forest governance, so we can actually support and ensure that the policies and the frameworks are being respected, increasing the access to transparency and forest monitoring, strengthening the networks of non-state actors, and supporting the participation in forest policies of policy processes of local communities and indigenous peoples. So far, the project has built the capacity of 50 organizations in forest governance processes and trained over 2,200 people on forest policy. But I want to make sure that we stress the importance of elevating and the role of not only a general group of non-state actors, but local communities and indigenous people. And I'm sure that Vicky is going to talk more about that as well.
Great. Thanks, Patricia. Victoria.
Yes. Well, thank you. It's really, what was said by Patricia and Robert earlier, I totally support. I just wanted to cite, in the Philippines, when we had these situations of worse floods and land erosion, usually it's the areas where deforestation has happened on massive scales. And the ones who have caused this deforestation are people who don't live in those communities. They are politicians, loggers who don't even live at all in those communities. So it really cannot be overstressed, the fact that the people who are directly depending on the forest and living in or around those forests should really be the main decision makers as far as how their forests should be managed. We can have the best laws, but if it doesn't include and doesn't really implement what these laws say, then it doesn't matter. In the Philippines, we have a very, very good law, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, and it enshrined the free prior informed consent, that nothing can be done in the territories of indigenous peoples without obtaining their free and prior informed consent. And yet there are still situations where there are loggers who can come and do what they need to do, or to either cut the forest for palm oil plantations or to just deforest. And I think that's really what my sense, and I believe firmly, is that indigenous peoples, the local communities, the ones who are dependent and who live off the forest, should really be empowered to be able to say what they want to happen with their forests, and to be able to have and not to be arrested or killed or tortured because they are doing that. That's one simple thing that is so simple, and yet it's so hard to implement, because the vested interests are really very powerful politically and militarily. They are the ones who have all these arms and power. So I think that's first. The secondly, of course, the issue of corruption. There's a lot of corruption happening. So even if we have laws like free prior informed consent, sometimes the vested interest, they go and they divide the communities, they pay communities to vote in their favor, and that's the end of the story, and that continues to happen. And therefore, the third point is about the vitality of monitoring and reporting processes. There really needs to be a mechanism where the people who are facing these problems can report. They will be enabled to monitor themselves, you know, so that whatever they monitor will really be full of the needed evidence, and they will be able to have access to complaints mechanisms or justice mechanisms. You know, in many indigenous peoples, they don't have that. They cannot even go to the court. They don't have even money to pay the lawyers. You know, so in those situations, how will you enable them to really seek justice and ensure that the inclusive and more effective forest governance can be part of the national processes and the national laws? And for me, that's really what it means. And of course, the enforcement mechanisms. No, whenever I've seen that there are independent evaluation, for instance, of flag TVPA processes, but how strong are the enforcement mechanisms? So in a way, there's also some kind of a top-down approach. I think it's both bottom-up approach and top-down, because top-down means you have the international standards that are set in place. And in the agreements, there should really be stronger push for them to, even if there's no national law, international standards, which many of them have signed on to, should be followed as well. And people should be able to understand that these international standards for human rights protection, among others, environmental standards, are there so that they can make use of these in asserting their contributions and strengthening their contributions to climate mitigation and biodiversity protection, and getting the support of the government. At the end of the day, the world should really look at this as the solutions to many of the problems that we face. And many of these solutions can be put together, and I'm sure it will bring about the meeting some of the goals we have. Of course, not all. And I that's why the private sector for me has a very big role to play, because even themselves, if they enter into agreements with other governments and they see that there is no national law that is in the interest, that protects the interest of those who are protecting the forest, then they should also push the government, support the government to put together a law and implement this. So those are some of the things I think that need to be done very, very effectively. Sorry,
No, thank you very much for that. Again, very, very important to get that balance right, whether we're talking about top down, bottom up, or both. And if we're talking about local, regional, national, and international, I think all those levels are key. And as you rightly said, they have to work together. To be fair, I must just give David a chance just to very quickly come in. We're running short of time, but David's actually leading the next session. So
I was going to say I agreed with all of the points that people made. The point about Victoria made there about the private sector entering into agreements, absolutely agree. They do come with a lot of power, and they should be able to push for better regulation, rather than, I think the private companies leave themselves exposed when they don't have the proper regulations in place. But the one point I did want to pick up on was the point that Robert made right at the start, that for a lot of these regulations to be effective, they do need to be quite simple, and they need to be easily understood by all of the actors involved. All of the different stakeholders across society need to understand their role in making it work. And I think it's one of the key points to stress.
Yeah, thank you for that, David. And let me just finish by saying thanks very much to all four of you for outlining your viewpoints. And I think they're all very important viewpoints, and they really emphasize the importance of this meeting, in fact, because we're not going to agree on everything. That's not the point of this. The point is to listen to each other's views and to really take on board what other people are saying. I'd also like just to thank Daniel again for his very warm welcome and for being here with us. I want to quickly just remind everybody, Richard said at the beginning this was the first forest governance forum in this region. As you heard earlier, I started my career in Papua New Guinea, and I just want to quickly show you this rather interesting document. This is a document called the National Forest Dialogue in Papua New Guinea. And it's a report written by my fellow land use officer, a guy called Graham Tyree, in 2007. And the Institute of National Affairs in Papua New Guinea attempted to have a forum like this in 2007. And I'm afraid to say this report is a very sad report because it ended in complete failure. At that point in time, Papua New Guinea was really not ready, I think it's fair to say, for a national forum like this. And various people literally pulled out, literally days before the meeting took place. And what was scheduled to be a 3-day meeting ended up as being a 1-day meeting. And I was really worried that when we started this 4-day meeting that we're having might end up as being a 1-day meeting. And I'm absolutely delighted to say it's not going to be. I'm absolutely delighted to say it's been really interesting hearing the differing viewpoints already, and the fact that people are willing to listen to each other. We've moved on such a long way from that very first Forest Governance Forum back in 2007 in Papua New Guinea. It was very interesting. And it's just great because the EU sponsored that. And the lessons that came out of that was that working at a national level doesn't always work. And we do need to work at an international level. If you're working at a national level, you are going to have stakeholders who unfortunately aren't going to meet with each other. It's simply not. And that lesson, I think, has been learned over the years. We've had the Chatham House meetings in UK, the illegal logging forest forums, and we've had forest governance forums all over many parts of Africa now, which have been really successful in bringing people together. And it's really delightful for me personally to actually be here on this particular forest governance forum with you all and hearing differing views and listening to differing views and other people listening to those views, taking them on board, not necessarily agreeing them. We don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to listen to each other. And I think that is really, really important. So I want to thank Victoria, Patricia, Robert and David again for kicking us off this morning. You've raised some really interesting big picture points that we'll be picking up during the rest of the week.